Thank you for joining us. So there's been an argument being made that if you supply weapons for civilians to protect themselves against Gaddafi, you're not violating the UN embargo. Do you agree with that?
Yes, it definitely is violating the United Nations sanction as well as international law. There's something called the the ATT, and under the ATT they cannot supply arms to the rebels. This is not new news either. They've been saying this from March, that they've been sending arms to the rebels. And at the London conference, the Prime Minister of Qatar said they were going to send arms. He said that in front of Hillary Clinton and all the representatives of the NATO states that were there. After that, General al-Yunus in Benghazi also said that they were getting arms. Then Reuters and the Wall Street Journal, they all said the United States was sending arms through Egypt to the rebels. It's reported, it's documented, we know that. This should not come as a surprise.
Forgive me for interrupting. So you're saying there are several sources and state officials that admit to funneling weapons into the country. But let's just clear something up. As I was saying earlier, there's an argument being made that if you supply weapons to civilians, you're not violating the UN embargo. But if you're supplying weapons to civilians, then surely they're not civilians, they're militants.
No, they're not civilians, number one. They're not civilians. They're organized, and anybody who knows the Geneva Convention, such as myself, who used to serve, the Geneva Conventions were my bread and butter for a time, so I know them very well. You cannot arm civilians who organize themselves into militias and say that they're civilians. They're no longer civilians. In fact, they're prisoners of war when you capture them. So that is a false argument that's detracting from the fact that weapons are being funneled into Libya from the west, from the east. Hillary Clinton went into Tunisia and Egypt before this NATO war started to secure routes into these countries. And Qatar openly spoke about it. The British openly spoke about it.
If I may just jump in here just for a moment. I mean, you're there in the Libyan capital. What's the view among Libyan people to arms shipments for the rebels over there in Tripoli?
No, it's very negative, of course. And I haven't been restricted here in Libya. I've traveled. I've seen the frontier from Tunisia to Tripoli. The people that are resisting this are the actual people, the Libyan people. There's no real organized military here. It's the people. The people of Libya have taken arms to defend this country against NATO. If you go to the checkpoints, you're going to see the regular people, like old people, people who are volunteers. It's not strictly a military force that's being fought against by the rebels, or whatever you want to call them, the Transitional Council Forces, revolutionaries, whatever you want to call them. They are a minority, and they are being armed by the outside, and in some cases they have better weapons than the actual Libyan military.
All right, so the rebels are the minority there. But as I was saying, you are there in the Libyan capital. Are you keeping a watch on the televisions there? What do you make of the media's coverage of the conflict? Do you see it as fair?
Well, you asked a very important question. This is a time of war. And if we ask ourselves what happened in World War II, were German and Japanese and Italian journalists allowed to go to the United States and report on what the United States was doing during World War II, or the Soviet Union or Britain? No, this didn't happen. So we have a new type of war, and there is a media war. It's being fought by more than one side. It's very important, and there isn't an accurate picture. Now, there's restrictions on the media here. I'm at the Rexus Hotel, and there are some restrictions. But that's because there's been some very questionable news coming out of here. The other day, the Reuters reporter was expelled, but he said that he met with opposition leaders outside of the gates of this hotel. That did not happen. I spoke to people here. He did not meet with opposition leaders here. I'm not saying that there is no opposition, but they are a minority, and that report, he was kicked out because of that report. And frankly, so he wasn't seen leaving the hotel.
Some journalists are having a tough time reporting on this ongoing conflict. 4 months into it now, briefly. So forgive me, I'm running out of time. One last question, please. How do you see the conflict playing out? Who has the upper hand at the moment?
The upper hand right now, I think it's too soon to say. The ball is in NATO's court. The ball is not in the Libya's court. They're fighting defensively. That's the reality of the situation. They're the ones who are being bombed. They're the ones who have planes overhead. It's not in their hands. So right now, I don't see NATO winning unless they invade or they continue to arm the rebels. But frankly, it's too soon to say. And I heard that Hillary Clinton said we're going to follow this to the end. I don't think this is looking good for NATO. And if they invade, they have to be fools. Every house in Tripoli is armed. They have neighborhood defenses set up, and every single house is armed. And all the people here are carrying weapons. If they didn't like Gaddafi, they would have turned those weapons on him. And I was at Green Square, and the media, maybe it was the media here, maybe it was the media outside that edited the news, but it was not accurate. There was a lot of people there, and it wasn't 10,000 people like the Washington Post said, or like the BBC said people were fleeing the next day. Those people came out from outside of Tripoli, and they stayed overnight. So they slept, and in the morning they were leaving, and then you have news reports saying they were fleeing the city. This is trying to cause panic. They're trying to live normal lives here. They're trying to live in a state of normal occupation.
A sense of normalcy, and as you say, there's a lot of apparent support for Gaddafi still, despite what Western media tends to say. Mari Darius Nazam Roaya, a researcher at the Center for Research and Globalization, thank you very much.
Okay.